How does sharing our stories help us heal and find some joy along the way, even when life feels extremely tough? Well, let's tune in and have a chat with Richard Kraft, who will share how spilling his guts about his own ups and downs not only helped him, but started a whole vibe of helping others also.
It then gives me that purpose. It gives me that fulfillment I think that I was missing. I feel purposeful in that I'm able to share somebody else's story as a platform. It gives their story a life to live forever, and not just for them, but for everyone they know, everyone who knew them.
Before we get into it, I just want to give a big shout out to Richard today. It's the 1 year anniversary of his podcast. Richard, watching you share your journey and connect with so many hearts has been absolutely inspiring. You truly embody your message to go out and be the person you want to meet. Congratulations on creating a space that not only reflects who you are, but also encourages others to do the same. Okay, amazing souls, welcome to this special episode of Connection Over Perfection, where we highlight stories that remind us of the power of human connection. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a very special guest and a dear friend, and also a fellow podcaster from the Podcast Connection Network, Richard Kraft. Richard is a former healthcare leader who brings a unique perspective to the table, fueled by his passion for helping others. His journey from the military to the medical field, a chef, and even Ubering showcases his diverse experiences and the many hats he has worn throughout his life. Now, Richard is the voice behind the Men of the House podcast, where he shares his down to earth views of life, always reminding us that even when things aren't perfect, there is a silver lining to be found. His calm yet vibrant energy makes every interaction truly a joy, and I feel extremely blessed that our paths have crossed. In addition to being a dedicated dad, husband, and son, Richard finds time to connect with all of us and stay up to date on the latest episodes from our amazing fellow podcasters in the network. Shouts out to Hunter Allen with the Everything is Connected, Heather Harrington with Hot Mess Espresso, and Amanda Hope with Magic and Metamorphosis. I'll get that right one day, Amanda, I promise. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore Richard's refreshing outlook in life, his journey, and how he finds joy and lessons in every moment, no matter what the circumstances. Richard, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
So, why podcasting? What in the world led you to podcasting?
Well, when you sent me the question, I had to think about it. And I did an episode not too long ago why I started podcasting. And it's kind of caused me to think about it in a weird sort of way and kind of evolved. You have to ask yourself, why would anyone start podcasting? For some people, maybe such as yourself, you have a business, you have a profession that you do, and your podcast kind of supports the profession. And there's many people like that. Some people do it to make money, but for me, I was kind of in this place where I'd been laid off from healthcare as a leader in 2020, 9 months into the pandemic, and they kind of shrunk their management structure. Everybody knows that they laid off tons of workers. I had to lay off people myself. It wasn't pleasant, but after being laid off, I took a little breather, regrouped, and I started applying for jobs. Never had any luck with jobs. And I'm talking, when people are like, well, like I'm talking serious like applications and tracking, like making a spreadsheet with the company. Did I get an interview or not? Did I get a call back? Did I complete the questionnaire?
Oh, wow.
Highlighted in green, because I come from that kind of healthcare administrative business background. So spreadsheets are a thing. And so I decided I would track. And, over the course of 3 years, I would get in these spurts and I would apply for like 80 to 100 jobs at a time, just full force.
Wow.
I would get some interviews, get some feedback, do this, do that, but nothing ever came through. I did have a few offers that I declined because they just weren't the right offers. I didn't want to move further away from my family and my wife's family. So, I'm doing all this stuff, nothing's coming through. And being laid off was very traumatic for me because it was the first time I'd ever been laid off, fired, anything of that nature.
Mhm.
And it's like 44 years old. So that's some people are like, oh, not a big deal, but it's pretty traumatic. And even though I got a severance package and all that kind of stuff, you're still faced with, hey, I'm like a middle-aged adult professional and my job market just shrunk. And how am I going to get back into the workforce? Or am I going to have to go do something smaller, for less money, less than my experience? And in that time, my health wasn't great. I was drinking more than I should have. I wasn't taking care of my health, which also led to a poor mental health component. And, somewhere along the way, it was just things weren't great. Life wasn't great. I wasn't great. Marriage wasn't great. I wasn't working. There was a lot of strain, a lot of familial strain. I slowly kind of just made up my mind somewhere, hey, I'm going to change this. And, I stopped drinking. That was the first thing I did on my birthday. I had two drinks and it didn't do anything great, just made me tired. And I decided if it wasn't going to do anything beneficial, then just stop it. I stopped that, started exercising kind of consistently. And, that's one piece of mental health. And I know this is kind of a long-winded answer, but that was taking care of the physical, which helps the mental. But I needed a mental focus. I needed to start digging myself out of this hole I was in mentally.
Mm,
And with that, just like exercising your body, I think I needed to exercise my brain. And
mm,
for me, I needed, like when I got my master's degree, I had a focal point, I had a goal. And for me, podcasting was kind of, my daughter and my father had both said, like, oh, you should start a podcast because I was an avid fan of them. And I always say, that doesn't necessarily qualify you just because you listen to them. But, for me, it was kind of like I'm already a journaler and whatnot. And I was like, well, maybe this would be a way to highlight some of my struggles, see if anybody else out there connects. But more importantly than that, I think what it was really about was I needed something to go towards. I needed a goal, I needed a focus. And and of course, starting a podcast can seem daunting. You think you need all this equipment and stuff. And I came across a podcast that's like 8 minutes long, like a little motivational thing. And he was like, oh, I use Spotify for podcasters. And as soon as I heard that and looked it up and saw that the barrier for entry was not that high, I was like, oh, maybe I can do this. And so, I was like, hey, it'll give me a way to express myself and whatnot. But I started it and kind of did a few episodes and, it would be kind of as I pleased. But then there was a point when, and that's kind of when podcasting, everything kind of shifted and became a little more serious, was that I decided, just like with exercise, with the podcast, I needed to be consistent. I needed something consistent to drive towards, meaning thinking about an episode, planning an episode, taking notes, recording my thoughts, maybe practicing. That goal of having something to drive towards each week and say, hey, I'm going to be consistent and I'm going to release an episode each week. What that kind of did for my mental health is huge because, yes, I was exercising, I was focusing, not perfect, making progress, but adding that mental component and that consistency and holding myself accountable to it and having something to be accountable for, that's kind of what's led me to this point. And so when you go, why did you start a podcast? Well, I think I needed a direction to go. I needed something to focus on. And of course, I love them.
Well, I love what you said, and this is kind of huge. So I want to just pause right there. Is that
Yeah.
I feel like what you're saying is it gave you purpose. So after having a career and having a purpose and, your drive to help others and your work, like you said, you did that for a long time and it gave you purpose and you're providing for your family and all of this. And then when that stopped, it was extremely traumatic. Not that your family wasn't your purpose, but I know for especially for a lot of men, it can feel like you aren't providing, you aren't living up. You have, there's this expectation that really is just inherent within you to provide and all of us to have purpose. And when that was ripped away, and also maybe do you feel like this abandonment, like this thing that you had poured your heart and your soul, your time, your sacrifice, all of this you had poured into it and it just shut down. It just cut off. It says you're no longer important. So not only,
Like a marriage.
yeah, exactly. I mean, especially the medical field, that pulls you away from your family and your life. You are probably
And you invest in the patients as well.
yeah, you probably spend more of your life there than you do with your family just because that's the reality of it. And so I could only imagine how detrimental that was. So on top of, you know, the reality of the financial and feeling like you're providing in that purpose and just like you said, the connection with the patients and helping that drive, for something bigger, a purpose greater than yourself. And I think that we all innately have that. And so when we don't feel like we have that purpose, we can feel lost. And so it sounds like
Hmm.
that you were on this journey of, kind of finding yourself again, finding your purpose that's higher than you, higher than just your everyday for the greater good. And it sounds like that when you found podcasting, it sparked that for you. And that kind of leads me to my next question is you talked about it a little bit was, how has podcasting helped you personally, mentally, emotionally, physically? And you can elaborate on this, but I think I heard you saying that really it gave you that purpose, which gave you something to move towards, that drive to be able to baby step it into your other goals, like physically and, emotionally. So, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, one, it's been cathartic, super cathartic. But as cathartic as it is, I've been journaling for probably 20 years, but nobody reads my journals.
Mm.
And I used to always joke that one day I won't be on this earth and they're going to find my blue box of journals and everybody's going to know what I really thought. Well, you know as well as I do when you start podcasting and you hit the publish button for the first time, and all of a sudden, what you think and all your thoughts are out there for the world to hear. So it's cathartic, it's scary, but in the end, when I don't like to look, I mean, I do and I don't, and it's kind of a healthcare habit. You track metrics,
Mm-hmm.
everything from appointments to no shows, everything. And so when I look at my metrics and I go, okay, I have listeners from these countries, to me, that, you know, takes away a little bit of that fear that I have with the vulnerability. That obviously, if they didn't connect with it, they wouldn't tune in to listen from it. So, besides the cathartic element, there's been a community element or getting feedback that somebody really enjoyed an episode or really enjoyed a guest. Or I've actually run into people from high school or even people that I used to manage who've listened to the podcast, and to hear their feedback or it's positive, um, to say, hey, kind of keep doing it, or they resonate. It then gives me that purpose. It gives me that fulfillment I think that I was missing. And so it's given me a little there. And then, of course, I've started to have some guests on and with their stories as well. I feel purposeful in that I'm able to share somebody else's story as a platform as opposed to it being about me because I'm not really a about me kind of person. So it's uncomfortable for me sometimes when it's a solo episode or I'm talking about stuff because I'm like, I don't really feel like an expert or I never really liked recognition um, when I worked or did anything because for me, I'm just doing my job or doing what I would do. So I really like guest episodes for that reason.
I'm the same. And I didn't realize that until I started having guests. And I was like, oh, this is a whole new world. I love this. This is amazing. The energy exchange, the everything. It's a very different experience.
Well, you're helping someone else's purpose, like their
Exactly.
story,
Right.
you know.
And so when you were talking about, getting that feedback
Hmm.
that people are liking it, for me, I get this sense of because we're all looking for that we matter, right? And that we're not alone.
Right.
And while it's so important and so valuable to have our own validation within ourselves, it feels nice like, hey, what I'm doing makes a difference and it does matter. So, kind of that outside validation or confirmation that, hey, what I'm doing is making a difference.
Well, you want to know that you're doing it right because I mean, think about it, even as something as simple as if, you're married like I am, if you have an intimate partner, I mean, if you want to know that you're doing what's right, what's good for them,
The
you need
feedback.
the feedback. And so I think just like anything else, part of that validation is not just knowing that somebody else likes it, but I
That's a
mean,
good point.
the type of person I am, I take pride in everything I do. And so it's like, I want to know that I'm doing it right or the way you like it. And, just like in what I loved and enjoyed about cooking so much was there's an immediate feedback
Mm.
component. When you send a dish out, you know immediately if the person loves it or they hate it. And to me, I never took it personally like, oh, you don't like that. Well, let me make you something you would like, or let me make it how you like it. Tell me how you like it because I'm here to serve. I want to do it for you. This is my gift to you.
I love that. And it really shows your heart in that it is a very servant's heart, very service that you're saying, which is a huge compliment because it's really hard for a lot of people to get that feedback and not take it personally because there is that fear that they're not doing it right and that they're going to disappoint. Whereas you were saying, I'm a life learner. I want to learn. I'm just going to continue to try different things until this feels good for both of us. It's that reciprocity. Like, I enjoy doing this for you and I want you to enjoy it too. So let's make it fun getting there instead of this very push and pull type.
Yeah.
I mean, we're kind of getting off to a different topic, but that's okay. So, when you have, say, you are cooking for somebody and
Mhm.
then the person doesn't like it, and you have this expectation, well, you don't want the feedback because you just want to make sure you get it right so bad that you can't take that feedback, that you take it personal, then you create this whole different, then the person eating it is like, okay, well, now I can't say anything because I'm going to hurt this person's feelings. So this communication, it creates this whole different dynamic instead of this beautiful, like I said, reciprocity of giving and taking and learning from one another to create a beautiful experience.
Yeah, because it's like anything, it's an energy exchange. I think it should be sending and receiving. Although, I think there are times, as a servant person, there are definitely sometimes that, and it's okay that I want to be the sender because somebody needs to receive.
Mm.
But then there's times in my life, that I need to be the receiver, and that's kind of what I've learned over the past year and a half of trying to undo, redo whatever was done.
Well, that programming of how things are supposed to be and
Yes.
creating this new experience that feels right for you and for the other person.
Yeah.
because we can heavily lean on only giving, and receiving can feel really difficult, which then we block the other person.
Well, and that's what it was. Understanding that I need to receive and allowing myself, giving myself the permission
Mm.
to receive. Because like I said, like I'm not huge on compliments. Like somebody could say, "Oh, you did a really good job with this." And I'd be like, "Well, thank you, but like I don't necessarily feel that way." And it's one of those things that I need to get better at. But it's also like what it when it leads to, I think, receiving help because, you know, within the podcast connection network, we talk about connection and mental health a lot. And as a man, it's so hard to ask for help. It's so hard to speak up and not suck it up. We've been programmed. And so for me, it's really been about unlearning that and trying to undo what has spent so many years being beat into me. And, the thing is at 47, growing up in the 80s and 90s, and then going to the military, to kitchens, like they're all rank hierarchy driven. They're very yell, suck it up. You're in this place, I'm in this place. Your only job is to do as I tell you to do. And on my own journey of leadership and everything, I had to learn, times have changed, and I would listen to leadership podcasts and read leadership books and, realize kind of that wasn't the way. And then, of course, during the pandemic, everything got flipped on its head and we started to question everything. And I think during that time, you start to question like, was the way I was raised and all the systems I've come up in that have programmed me, were they the right way?
Mm.
And are you being stoic, if you will, by keeping your mouth shut, by just sucking it up and doing what needs to be done? Or is it harder as a man? Like, I feel nervous, like as a kid when you're about to go ask a girl out and not know if she's going to say no. Like, that's the way, same way, like when I say this, like, it's more nervous to ask for help.
Yeah.
Like, it's more nerve-wracking to open your mouth and say, hey, like, I'm not okay. And so just giving myself permission and understanding that.
And that's huge. That's one of the things I actually really love about your podcast is that you talk about all of this stuff, and you talk about the struggles that you go through as a man, which is rare and so beautiful to have that vulnerability, right? So many men are going through so much. And like you said, it's not talked about because that's not the norm. And so that's one of the things that I love about your podcast is breaking that norm and saying, hey, this is my real life. And everybody is struggling with this. We know everybody's struggling with this, but helping others not feel alone by putting it out there, by you setting that example and being vulnerable and saying, hey, there is a different way. And it's still uncomfortable. Like I'm being real and honest about that
Mhm.
it's uncomfortable, but we're going to do this because you're not alone. And we struggle with these things, and that there is a different way. It doesn't have to continue to be that.
I think understanding that the healthcare system's broken. So the systems we were raised in were kind of broken, and kind of where we as men get this like suck it up, but also this traditional, and I have nothing against this to anyone listening. I have however your marriage works is however it works or whatever. Whoever works, it doesn't have to be the man, it doesn't have to be the woman, who's the breadwinner, whatever. But
Do what feels right for you.
right. But what I want to put into perspective was I was raised this way. And so I definitely felt this enormous less than when I got laid off.
Right.
And so, I've taken to podcasting, Ubering, doing all these things, whatever, to make money. But, kind of the point is in saying that our systems and the way things have been done and the way we think about things are so skewed, just remember these systems were built off people who participated in like the Great Depression, World War II, the Industrial Revolution, segregation, women not being able to vote, women staying at home, and that was their place. And and then women fought for the right to vote, and then they wanted to get in the workplace. They wanted to be CEOs and, have equal rights with men. And I'm okay with that, like hey, you're a person, not man, woman, you're a person and you deserve the equality. But with that equality, it's the same way as like those systems were broken. Now we have the equality. The difference is now my wife has the steady job and I'm the person who I podcast and Uber, but I'm the one who stays at home when the daughter's sick. I take her to appointments. I'm the more flexible one. It's worked for us and our relationship of 18 years has kind of been that way. It's sometimes I've been the breadwinner, sometimes she's been the breadwinner, but we make it work. But having to accept that and unlearn and see the past systems as faulty and where we get our beliefs and views, that's a whole other part of it. Like being able to look at and understand that perspective, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, there's some people that have more traditional households and roles, and if that works for you and your family and you're happy with it, then by all means go for it. This is kind of what works for us.
Just a quick interruption.
Yo, this is Hunter from the Everything's Connected podcast. I'm so glad you tuned in. Did you know that this podcast, as well as my own, are part of a much larger community called the Podcast Connection Network? We have some pretty awesome shows hosted by some even more amazing souls, just waiting to be discovered. If you're curious, head on over to the link in the description below. You will not be disappointed.
Okay, now back to the show. Yeah, and I think the big thing that I hear you saying is that asking that question, is this working for me? Is what we're doing working? Does this feel right? Does this feel good? And you found yourself at a place that didn't feel good. It wasn't working, right? And I think that that's so important. And we talk about this a lot, is getting to this place where you question everything. We are programmed to not question, to just continue to keep doing. And so I think that one of the things that, everybody at the Podcast Connection Network is very passionate about is questioning, like, hey, what's going on? Like, what's happening for me? Does this feel right? And, these systems were put into place. Now, I was just doing another episode and he was talking about system relevance. And the systems aren't bad in itself. It's just that they're old systems. And we have
Mm-hmm.
to figure out, are those systems working for us? For a lot of people, those systems are not working anymore. And so we just have to figure out how to change those systems for ourselves, like you were saying, because when the system fails us, when we lose a job, we are faced with having to do shit a different way. And that is the reality of our life. And what I love about your podcast is that you talk about all of these things. It's like a real life conversation, just about everyday things, things that are really important that we often don't talk about. And like you said, especially men. And, you've had some incredible guests on, very touching. That kind of leads me to my next question is, what story has impacted you the most? Maybe that you've heard in a previous podcast or one that's been shared on your own podcast.
Well, definitely on my own, I would say so far the guests, there's not really a favorite, maybe like children.
I was going to say those two that I've heard are so
Yeah,
good. It would be really tough. They were very, very moving stories.
they're both stories of resilience and fortitude. And the person I interviewed earlier today, it's the same. No resilience, but fortitude.
Mm.
And, I would say that those stick out to me for mine, but let's say something similar is having been in the military. I'm a huge military fan. Order, discipline, things like that. Fast pace. I worked in the emergency room for 6 years nights. And there's a story of Nick Machine Lavery. He was a special forces soldier and got blown up, amputated leg, was told he would never do his job again. He did anything and everything. Now he's a chief warrant officer, but essentially that, I try to only keep people like him in my Instagram page because you are what you consume, and I only want to consume positivity and things that either uplift me or tell me to go one more or tell me just keep going. And you can. And don't listen to what anyone else says. Make up your mind, figure it out. Figure out how to make it happen. And this guy, he goes to the gym, he takes care of his health, he keeps his mindset in order. And he had to learn to re-swim, rerun. He had to requalify. He had to prove to the Special Forces team that he wasn't a liability, because you cannot be going into combat with one leg or a prosthetic. And if you're that kind of person, if you're a servant, if you have a heart and you care about your teammates, the last thing you want to be is a liability. So it wasn't just about proving to his team that he was capable, but about proving to himself in that process. And it's the process. And that's kind of a story that really resonates with me, and kind of where I feel like I had to make a choice, and I've had to make this happen. And sometimes it seems like I'm going nowhere, but sometimes when I look at it, I can see. I mean, I came across a picture of me I took in the mirror on a treadmill last July of 2023. And I look now and I'm thinner, I'm smaller. And, my mom was holding up, we're doing that. We're doing a big sale and getting rid of stuff. And we were holding up my slacks from when I was in healthcare. And I was like, holy cow, those are mine. Because they were
Mm.
so wide. And I was like, man, you know? And so you look at that and you look at how far you come, and you never seem like you're going to get there in the beginning. But you can look at a picture 8 or 9 months later and go, I did. And how did I do it? Consistency, and consistency in working. And it doesn't mean being perfect. It just means waking up and
Moving
just
in a direction.
right, micro wins, small wins, but really also learning to accept and release your failures, which is probably the hardest part. And that's a mindset thing that kind of he talks about. It's okay to make a mistake, look at it, learn from it, but you have to leave it behind, and you have to start looking forward on how you're either going to progress, correct the mistake, not make the same mistake again. Those are kind of the stories of resilience and fortitude, or stories that really resonate with me, because I would like to think that I have that. And I'm the kind of person that if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And so liking to think I have that, it resonates with me. But it's hard because, yes, you have to believe it. But like anything, it's sometimes we only believe the bullshit, the systems that are taught into us, the broken ones that are pounded into us. But sometimes it's hard to believe ourselves, even when we know we're right,
Yeah.
even when we know what's best for us.
Well, and I definitely think that you have that resilience and that drive, which is something that I think that everybody in the network definitely possesses, which is something that we look for because, like you said, there can only be so much motivation from outside. You have to, have that within that for yourself, like you said. Your why can be a lot of things, and part of it has to be something that drives from within you, that doesn't come from the outside. One of the things that I love is that you're able to take shitty situations and you're like, okay, yeah, this is a shitty situation right now, but how can I extract the good out of it? And I know that you've mentioned that the job switch was really huge, but you're able to be with your family more. You're able to be with your wife and your daughter, and able to, I just remember you saying this: when they were sick, you were able to be there
Hmm.
for them and take care of them, which is something different. And so I love in each of these, you find a way to really connect with people. and to find that time. Even right before we got on, we were talking about family time, and your family loves games, and you're not like a super huge fan of it,
Mm-hmm.
but you try to find a way to connect because this life is so precious. And so, in honoring that and cherishing that, and I feel you do the very same with your podcast. You're like, this life is precious. I want people to know that they're not alone. And this is a way for me to kind of do that. And by bringing other people on, you're saying, you matter, your story matters. And so, just that connection, which is something that
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love because I'm all about connection.
Yeah. The other thing is I feel like it's, you'd put in the questionnaire and we would talk about, but the kind of the thing is I don't want it to sound too morbid, but having spent as much time as I have seeing life gone in an instant is that
Mm,
if nothing else, having someone on, it gives their story a life to live forever, and not just for them, but for everyone they know, everyone who knew them, maybe their children. And I know after I'm long gone, that my daughter, my loved ones can go back and maybe listen to what really impacted me. And I know that, some of the people I've interviewed, their stories are important to a lot of people too. And this is a way to not only record history a little bit, but just to memorialize maybe a loved one that's no longer here.
yeah. And so, kind of just to wrap it all into a nice little bow, is that it sounds like that you started this podcast really to help yourself, to help you move on this journey to find purpose. But in that, you've also helped others do that for themselves, giving them a voice and purpose. And also that, like you said, that life is so short and so fragile. And just to highlight those connections and to help others' legacy stay on.
Yes, legacy, history.
Yeah. And so I love that. I love that in your podcast, you do that for yourself, your family. Like you said, nobody's going to read your journals. This is
This is
like,
it.
yeah, this is a journal that
Well,
you,
we've transformed. Now I journal for myself, but now I podcast kind of for everyone. But
Mhm.
like systems change, the way we do all this changes. And we used to get these huge textbooks at the beginning of each school year, and now kids get a laptop.
Right,
And so this is how we record history. And the great thing about this medium is it's not like the telephone game or papers and papers being found and transcribed of somebody's interview of what World War II was like.
right.
We're able to almost capture some events and some feedback in history and how people felt about an event in real time, given social media, podcasting, YouTube, and all that. And so,
That different energy too.
yes, I'm trying to embrace it and use it for what it's worth. And as it evolves down the road, just like when I started the podcast, I'll try to evolve with it and keep up with it. But, the most important thing is that the stories get shared
Mhm.
because there's lessons in the story. And even if you can't find the lesson,
Maybe there's something to relate to.
yeah, or maybe it's just you want to hear that person's voice one more time.
Mm,
Could be anything.
I love that. That almost made me cry because
It's a little deep, it's a little crazy,
no, it's beautiful and
but
it's
true.
true. It's very true. And that triggered a thought that in this world, so many people feel alone. And there's something different, a different energy exchange. And if we want to get scientific, there is a frequency difference if you're reading a textbook and you're hearing voices, such as on this episode. You can feel that energy difference, and it can help you not feel so alone. And I think that that's one of the reasons that podcasting has really blown up, especially around the pandemic when there were so many people disconnected, that this is a way to feel connected to people.
When you get to know a little bit about people that you've never met, like you listen to a podcast and,
Mm.
getting to hear a little about someone and their personal lives. And it's crazy how we're so much more connected than we've ever been, but so much more disconnected
Mm.
in a way, that like,
Right.
you could go up to somebody and feel like you know everything about them because you know them online, but still have an awkward energy exchange.
Well, it's a way to be connected without that vulnerability.
Yes. Yeah. Well, but you and I are of a different age group where you had to go up and talk to people. Like,
Right.
if I wanted a date with you, I had to muster up the courage to write you a note and say circle
Right,
yes or no,
exactly.
or call up and get your mother and have to ask for you and
It's cheating. They just
or swipe,
text. That's
swipe.
cheating. Or swipe. Right.
And so,
Exactly.
yeah, and
Exactly.
so as connected as we are and we have these platforms, some people just don't have the courage, the vulnerability to do that and make that connection. And I posted the other day that I thought that authenticity and transparency should be new social currency. And part of
Mhm.
that is for those people, like, hey, don't just be about it on wherever you're at, or don't just talk about it. Like, be that same person in person, you know, be the person you would want to meet. But go out there and make that connection. Like, if you say you're that person, like, hey, then go up and talk to that person like a normal person and just remember they're a person. I had to remember that. Like, I went to a concert and like you meet somebody that you respect and you don't want to make it weird. And you just have to go like, hey, they're people too, and just
Mhm.
be okay. Don't freak yourself out and just be yourself. And
Right.
it was wonderful.
Well, and I think that that's too why we talk about these things. Like we try to be the example, like this can be uncomfortable. And we talk about situations like you have a whole episode on that concert
Hmm.
and your exchange and connection. So definitely go check out that episode because it was really good.
And I was so nervous and almost didn't go.
And that's what I'm saying. So we talk about these things so that people don't have to feel alone and be the example. So then maybe other people have, that courage to go out and do the same thing. I love that. So podcasting is amazing, what we're saying.
Yes. A lot of work, but amazing.
Yes, it is. And, we've been super blessed to be part of this network and meet
Hmm.
some amazing, amazing humans. But one of the things that I kind of want to leave our listeners with is you often say, go out there and be the person you want to meet. What does that mean for you?
Don't be a dick. Don't be an asshole. Which
Right?
I've
Like,
often been accused of being, but essentially what I'm saying is when the pandemic happened and the world got flipped on its head and we started to question everything, that authenticity and transparency never became more important. And because so many people felt lied to and everything, the world's been flipped up on its head and the dust is still settling, I feel like. And some people are still angry about it, and some people are going to hold it against government, whoever, forever, whatever. They're going to blame, 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 blame. But go out and be the person you would want to meet. It's about taking some personal responsibility, some personal accountability on who you want to be, the reflection you want to be, and the person you would want to be, and that person you want to meet. I mean, I meet strangers all the time as an Uber driver. I'd be waiting for food and pick up a conversation with a guy who moved here from like California. And I'm like, how does one get from California to Texas and blah, 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 blah. And we just have this wonderful conversation, out of nowhere. And it was just about being open. It was about being the person I would want to meet, about being responsive and just a handshake, a hello, whatever. And when you do that and you treat people, it's so simple. Treat people the way you want to be treated, but go out and be the person you would want to be. And just if you embody that, that like energy is going to come to you. But it's through these connections. If we want any change in the world, we can't rely on others to do it. We're going to have to do it. And the people we come in contact with have to do it in these energy exchanges. So if we all go out and be the person we want to meet, then just imagine how much better the world could be.
I love that. I love that. And that brings me to kind of everything that we've talked about today is connection with self and connection with others, which I'm all about. And so for podcasting, that really has been what has helped you connect to yourself and connect to others. And it's so important. I think one thing I want to leave our listeners with is find what works for you. Maybe it's podcasting, maybe it's Ubering, maybe it's, being a TikTok creator. Whatever it is that helps you move towards being closer connected to yourself and others, do more of that.
Yes. Do what feels right. You'll know.
Right.
When you find
Yeah.
your tribe, it's effortless. And when you're going in the right direction, things they seem like they're happening rather fast, even though it's been a short amount of time. And I had to think about this. The only gauge of how do I know I'm headed in the right direction or doing the right things, like emotionally, spiritually, physically, this is how I know. And some people know this, some people don't, but I'm down 35 pounds, 9 prescriptions to 2 prescriptions.
Huge.
Started a podcast. I'm now part of a podcast connection network.
With amazing people.
That's right. But a lot of people don't know. Like our first meeting that was just going to be a maybe a 15-minute conversation. We talked for hours within all of us.
Right.
And it was the same way of the energy exchange at the concert of if you just have the courage, the vulnerability to be the truest version of yourself, then your people, your tribe, it will find you. And I think if you continue to work and you're approaching, grinding it out, then, how do you know? Well, if something's working, these two things are the only things that are, I mean, not the only things, I mean, they're going right. They're
Right.
going right in my life. And you can tell by the measurements of,
The evidence.
yes.
Yeah.
And so I want to keep doing whatever's working. But, accepting that there's going to be more challenges and speed bumps along the way has taught me to treat this like a marathon, go for the long haul, and understand that there's going to be challenges in the way and don't let them, it doesn't mean things are going wrong, you know?
Right. Well, that's huge because you said, when you know you're getting it right, it can almost feel effortless. And I think we mean effortless in the energy. It feels gratifying, even if it is hard work. Cause like
Right.
this shit is hard. Like we have late nights,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard work. And, relationships, connections, working out.
Being a father, being a husband.
Right. It's all a lot of work, but there's a sense of gratification. There's
Right.
a sense of purpose
And
and it
fulfillment.
feels good. Fulfillment. Exactly. Exactly. And so I think a lot of people confuse hard work with gratification, meaning that if it's hard, then it isn't supposed to be.
Right.
And that's not really true. I think we mean more effortless, Lynn, in that it's almost addicting. It's almost
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? It feels so good that I want to keep doing it, even though it's really tough, hard work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of, like people don't understand. They see the finished product. They don't see all the
The
trials. They don't,
hours,
yeah,
exactly.
or trying to edit,
How
I
much
mean,
editing,
yeah,
exactly.
there's a whole difference of, there's podcasts that listeners probably listen to that have teams of people who edit and do everything, and the speakers do nothing but speak. But, here at the Podcast Connection Network, we do it all. We learn from each other and we do everything. And there's a learning curve, but it's, I think people should embrace challenge and hard things, because that's where growth comes from. And, you know, not necessarily is that my purpose, but in order to get to my purpose, you got to do some hard and challenging things. And, while hopefully one day I'll just be able to be the speaker of a podcast, um,
We'll get there.
it doesn't hurt to learn the ins and outs because I learned as a healthcare leader you know, people are going to come to you for answers if they see you as the head or the figurehead, even if you're the face of something. And sometimes it's, sometimes it's, I don't know. And sometimes you just got to figure it out.